The Nexus trade station was old. It had been floating in space for thousands of years, orbiting a dying red star at the edge of known space. Millions of beings passed through its corridors every year. They came to trade, to talk, to hide, and sometimes to start new lives far from their homeworlds. Emma Price had lived on Nexus for 3 years. She was a xenolinguist, which meant she studied alien languages. She worked for Earth's diplomatic corps, helping humans and aliens understand each other. It was quiet work, but she liked it. She liked learning how different species thought and spoke. She liked finding the small connections that made communication possible. Emma was 32 years old. She had brown hair that she kept short because long hair was difficult to manage in space. She had kind eyes and a quick smile. Most aliens found her pleasant to be around, even if they did not fully understand humans yet. Humanity was new to the galaxy. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies. Most species ignored them. Some found them curious. A few found them annoying. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. Humans were not important enough to worry about. Emma did not mind being underestimated. She had learned that being overlooked had its advantages. People said things around her that they would never say around a more powerful species. She listened. She learned. She remembered. One of the few genuine friends Emma had made on Nexus was a Valorian named Keth. The Valorians were a quiet species. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were large and dark, like pools of black water. They moved gracefully, almost like dancers, and they spoke in soft voices that were easy to miss in a crowded room. The galaxy did not think much of the Valorians. They had no army. They had no weapons. They had survived for thousands of years by being useful, but not threatening. They were diplomats, translators, and technicians. They fixed things that others broke. They smoothed over conflicts that others started. And they were often treated like servants by species who considered themselves superior. Keth worked as a maintenance technician on Nexus. He spent his days crawling through ventilation shafts, repairing broken pipes, and fixing machines that no one else wanted to touch. It was hard work, and most beings on the station never even noticed him. He was invisible to them. Just another Valorian doing a job that someone had to do. But Emma noticed him. She had met Keth during her first month on Nexus. A pipe had burst in her quarters, flooding her small room with recycled water. Keth had arrived to fix it. Most technicians would have done the job in silence and left. But Keth had been curious about the human items in her room. He had asked about the photographs on her wall, the books on her shelf, the small plant she kept by the window. They had talked for an hour that day, and they had been friends ever since. Emma made a point of visiting Keth whenever she could. She brought him food from the human sector, things he had never tasted before. She asked about his family back on Valoria, his 3 younger siblings and his elderly mother who worried about him constantly. She listened when he talked about his dreams of one day returning home and opening a small repair shop. Keth had never had a friend like Emma. Most beings treated him like he did not exist. But Emma saw him. She remembered his name, his stories, his hopes. She treated him like he mattered. And to her, he did. It was late evening on Nexus when everything changed. Emma was walking through the lower corridors, the parts of the station where the lights flickered and the walls were stained with age. She had been visiting a colleague and was taking a shortcut back to her quarters. She did not see the Draxians until it was too late. There were 3 of them. Draxians were large, heavily muscled beings with thick gray skin and small, cruel eyes. They were known throughout the galaxy as mercenaries, enforcers, and bullies. They took what they wanted and hurt anyone who got in their way. Most species feared them. Most species stayed out of their path. These 3 had been drinking. Emma could smell the sharp chemical scent of Draxian alcohol from several feet away. They were loud and aggressive, shoving each other and laughing at jokes she could not understand. Then they saw her. The largest one smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. He said something to his companions, and they all laughed. Then he stepped forward and grabbed Emma by the arm. She tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. She was not weak by human standards, but against a Draxian, she had no chance. He pulled her closer, and she could see the hunger in his eyes. Emma screamed for help. Her voice echoed through the empty corridor, but no one came. No one ever came to the lower corridors. Then she heard footsteps. Keth appeared from a side passage. He was holding a maintenance tool in one of his 4 hands. His pale blue skin had gone even paler. His large dark eyes were wide with fear. But he did not run. He walked forward until he stood between Emma and the Draxians. The largest Draxian laughed. A Valorian defending a human was the most absurd thing he had ever seen. Valorians were weak. Everyone knew that. They could not fight. They could not even defend themselves. Keth's voice trembled when he spoke. He told the Draxians to let Emma go. He told them that she had done nothing wrong. He told them that what they were doing was against station law. The Draxians laughed harder. The largest one released Emma and turned his full attention to Keth. He asked the Valorian what he thought he was going to do. He asked if Keth really believed he could stop 3 Draxians by himself. Keth did not answer with words. When the Draxian reached for Emma again, Keth swung his maintenance tool with all his strength. It connected with the side of the Draxian's face, leaving a deep gash across his cheek. For a moment, everyone was still. Then the Draxians attacked. What followed was brutal. Emma screamed and tried to help, but one of the Draxians shoved her against the wall so hard that she could not breathe. She watched helplessly as the other 2 beat Keth with their fists and feet. They hit him again and again. They broke his arms. They broke his legs. They cracked his ribs and his skull. Keth did not beg. He did not cry out. He just looked at Emma with his large, dark eyes, and she could see that he was not afraid. He had made his choice. He had known what it would cost him, and he had done it anyway. By the time station security arrived, Keth lay broken on the floor. His pale blue blood pooled beneath him, spreading slowly across the cold metal. The medics rushed him to the medical bay, but no one thought he would survive. Emma rode with him in the transport. She held his hand, the only part of him that was not broken. He looked up at her, and his lips moved. She leaned closer to hear. He whispered something in Valorian. The translator in her ear struggled with the words, but she understood their meaning. You were kind to me. That was enough. Then his eyes closed and Emma began to cry. Emma did not leave the medical bay for 6 days. She sat in a hard plastic chair beside Keth's bed. She watched the machines breathe for him. She watched the doctors come and go, their faces showing less hope each time. She held his hand during the long nights when the station grew quiet, and the only sound was the soft beeping of the monitors. The doctors were surprised that Keth survived the first night. They were more surprised when he survived the second. By the 3rd day, they began to believe he might actually live. But living was not the same as recovering. The damage was too severe. Keth's left arms would never move properly again. His legs had been broken in so many places that he would need a cane to walk for the rest of his life. His career as a maintenance technician was over. He would never climb through ventilation shafts again. He would never fix the machines he loved so much. The Draxians, meanwhile, received a fine. That was it. A fine. They paid it with money they had stolen from weaker species. Then they walked out of the security office laughing. One of them even waved at Emma through the window as they left. Emma felt something change inside her that day. She had always believed that the galaxy was mostly fair. She had believed that if people followed the rules and treated others with respect, things would work out in the end. She had been wrong. She returned to her quarters and sat in the darkness for a long time. Then she began to write. Emma wrote down everything. She described the attack in detail. She explained how Keth had stepped in front of 3 Draxians to protect her. She described what they had done to him, every blow and every broken bone. She attached the security footage from the corridor cameras. She attached the medical reports showing the extent of Keth's injuries. She attached the record of the trial, if it could even be called a trial, and the laughable fine the Draxians had received. Then she sent it all back to Earth. Emma did not expect anything to happen. Earth was small and weak compared to the great powers of the galaxy. Humanity had no real influence in galactic affairs. No one would care about one injured Valorian on a distant space station. She was wrong about that, too. Her report traveled through diplomatic channels until it reached a desk on Earth. The desk belonged to Admiral Ben Carter, commander of Earth's 3rd Fleet. Carter was 63 years old. He had gray hair, deep lines on his face, and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had spent his entire adult life in the military. He had fought in the border conflicts that marked humanity's first decades in space. He had lost friends, ships, and sometimes his faith in whether any of it mattered. But Carter had a code. He believed in loyalty. He believed in honor. He believed that some things were worth fighting for even when the odds were against you. He read Emma's report 3 times. He watched the security footage of Keth stepping between Emma and the Draxians. He watched a small, fragile being face down 3 creatures who could kill him with their bare hands. He watched Keth swing that maintenance tool, knowing exactly what would happen next. Then Carter picked up his communicator and called a meeting. The conference room was located deep inside Earth's military headquarters. The walls were made of thick steel, and the windows were covered with security screens. Only a handful of people had clearance to enter this room. Today, 4 of those people sat around the central table. Admiral Carter stood at the head of the table. To his left sat General Lisa Hendricks, commander of the Earth Marine Corps. She was a small woman with sharp features and sharper eyes. She had led ground forces on 6 different worlds and had never lost a campaign. To Carter's right sat Secretary of Defense Nathan Cole. He was a civilian, but he understood war better than most soldiers. He had grown up in the ruins of the old cities, back when Earth was still recovering from its own conflicts. He knew what violence could do to a society. At the far end of the table sat President Daniel Grant. He was younger than the others, only 52, but his hair had gone white during his first term in office. The weight of leading humanity through its first decades among the stars had aged him rapidly. Carter activated the display screen. The footage from Nexus began to play. They watched in silence as Keth stepped forward. They watched him face the Draxians. They watched what happened next. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Then Carter pointed to the frozen image of Keth lying broken on the floor. "This Valorian," he said, "put himself between our citizen and 3 attackers he knew he could not defeat. He did this knowing what it would cost him. He did this because Emma Price had shown him kindness. Because she remembered his name and asked about his family and treated him like a person instead of furniture." General Hendricks leaned forward. "The Draxians received a fine." "A fine," Carter repeated. "They nearly killed him, and they received a fine." Secretary Cole rubbed his temples. "The Draxian hegemony is one of the largest military powers in the sector. They have 300 warships and control 12 star systems. We have 40 ships and 1 planet." "I know the numbers," Carter said. "Then you know this is not a fight we can win." Carter turned to face the secretary directly. "The galaxy thinks we are weak. They think we will accept this. They think we will let this pass because we are new, because we are small, because we are afraid." He paused. "They are wrong." President Grant spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but firm. "What exactly are you proposing, Admiral?" Carter took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything he believed in came down to what he said next. "I am proposing that we show the galaxy what happens when someone protects one of our citizens. Keth saved Emma Price. He asked for nothing in return. He expected nothing. He simply did what was right. Carter's voice grew harder. And now I am proposing that we do the same for him. I am proposing that we go to war on behalf of Keth and the Valorian people. The room went very quiet. General Hendricks was the first to respond. You want to declare war on the Draxian hegemony, for one Valorian? Yes. They will destroy us. Maybe. Carter met her eyes. Or maybe they will learn something about humanity that they have forgotten. Maybe they will learn that there are things worth fighting for beyond territory and resources. Maybe they will learn that kindness is not weakness. President Grant stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he turned back to face the others. Make the preparations, he said. We are going to war. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room Emma had ever seen. It was shaped like a massive bowl, with thousands of seats rising in circles around a central platform. Each seat belonged to a different species, a different world, a different civilization that had earned its place among the stars. The ceiling was made of transparent material, and through it, Emma could see the swirling colors of the nebula that surrounded the council station. She sat in the human section, which was small and located near the back. Humanity had only been granted observer status on the council 15 years ago. They had no real voting power. They were allowed to watch and occasionally to speak, but their opinions carried little weight. Today would be different. Emma watched as the delegates took their seats. She saw the insectoid Corvani clicking their mandibles in quiet conversation. She saw the aquatic Selthari in their water-filled mobility suits. She saw the massive Draxians, the ancient Eldari, and dozens of other species she had studied during her years as a xenolinguist. And she saw the Draxians. Their delegation sat in a prominent position near the front of the chamber. There were 6 of them, all large and muscular, wearing the formal armor of their warrior caste. They looked bored. Council sessions usually dealt with trade agreements and border disputes, matters they considered beneath their attention. The chamber fell silent as the council speaker took the central platform. The speaker was an Eldari, one of the oldest beings in the galaxy. Her skin was like weathered stone, and her eyes glowed with a soft blue light. She had served as speaker for 300 years. This emergency session has been called at the request of the human delegation, the speaker announced. Her voice echoed through the chamber, translated simultaneously into hundreds of languages. Earth's ambassador will now address the council. Emma watched as Chris Palmer walked to the central platform. Palmer was not what most species expected from a human diplomat. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the build of a soldier rather than a politician. His face was weathered from years of service on distant worlds, and his eyes were calm and steady. He wore a simple gray suit instead of the elaborate robes favored by most galactic ambassadors. He carried no notes. He had memorized everything he needed to say. Palmer looked around the chamber slowly, making eye contact with delegates from a dozen different species. Then he began to speak. 47 days ago, a Valorian citizen named Keth saved the life of an Earth citizen named Emma Price. He paused, letting the translation catch up. Keth was a maintenance technician on the Nexus trade station. He earned a modest salary doing work that most beings considered beneath their notice. He had no weapons, no training, and no reason to believe he could survive what he was about to do. Palmer touched a control on the platform, and a holographic image appeared above him. It showed Keth standing in that corridor, facing the 3 Draxians. His 4 arms were trembling, but his stance was firm. When 3 Draxian citizens attacked Emma Price, Keth stepped between them. He knew what would happen. He did it anyway. The image changed to show the aftermath. Keth broken on the floor, Emma kneeling beside him, the pale blue blood spreading across the metal. Several delegates looked away. Even some of the Draxians shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Nexus Station Authority investigated the incident, Palmer continued. The 3 Draxians were found guilty of assault. They received a fine of 200 galactic credits each. A murmur ran through the chamber. 200 credits was nothing. It was less than the cost of a decent meal in most sectors. The Draxian hegemony was informed of this incident through diplomatic channels. They were asked to provide additional justice for the victim. Palmer's voice hardened. They refused. They stated that the matter had been resolved according to station law and that no further action was required. He looked directly at the Draxian delegation. They were wrong. The Draxian ambassador rose to his feet. He was the largest of his delegation, with ceremonial scars covering his face and arms. Is this why you called an emergency session? To complain about a minor incident on a trade station? The matter was handled according to law. Your species is wasting the Council's time. Palmer waited until the ambassador finished speaking. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I did not call this session to complain, Palmer said. I called this session to make an announcement. He turned back to face the full chamber. The United Earth government has reviewed this incident carefully. We have examined the evidence. We have considered our options, and we have reached a decision. The chamber went very quiet. Effective immediately, the United Earth government declares a state of war against the Draxian hegemony. For a moment, no one moved. No one even breathed. Then the chamber exploded. Delegates rose to their feet, shouting in 100 different languages. The translation systems struggled to keep up. The Draxian ambassador was screaming something about insanity and destruction. Other species were calling for order, for explanation, for someone to confirm that they had heard correctly. Palmer stood calmly in the center of the chaos, waiting. Eventually, the speaker restored order. The delegates returned to their seats, though many were still trembling with shock or confusion. The Draxian ambassador spoke again, his voice shaking with rage. You cannot be serious. You would go to war over one injured alien. Your species is barely a century out of your own atmosphere. You have 40 ships. We have 300. We will destroy you completely. Palmer nodded slowly. Perhaps not. But either way, the galaxy will remember what we did and why we did it. This is madness, the ambassador said. No species in the history of the Council has ever declared war on behalf of another. It makes no sense. It has no logic. You are right, Palmer said. By your standards, it makes no sense. You fight for territory, you fight for resources, you fight for power. He shook his head. We do not think like you. We fight for other reasons. What reasons could possibly justify this? Palmer looked at Emma in the human section. She was crying, but she nodded at him. He turned back to the ambassador. Keth stood between Emma Price and 3 beings who wanted to hurt her. He asked for nothing in return. He expected nothing. He simply did what he believed was right. Palmer's voice grew stronger. And now we will do the same for him. He raised his hand, and another holographic image appeared. It showed the flag of Earth, the blue and green circle against a field of stars. Furthermore, we extend the full protection of Earth's military to the Valorian people. From this day forward, any attack on Valoria or its citizens will be treated as an attack on Earth itself. The Valorian delegation, a small group near the back of the chamber, stared at Palmer in complete shock. Several of them had begun to cry. Palmer lowered his hand and faced the full council one last time. You have misunderstood humanity. You thought we were weak because we were new. You thought we were harmless because we were small. You thought we would accept whatever treatment you gave us because we had no choice. He shook his head. You were wrong about all of it. And now you will learn what happens when someone protects one of us. You will learn what it means to have humanity as your ally, he paused, or your enemy. Then he walked off the platform, and the chamber erupted into chaos once more. The Draxians expected the war to last 3 weeks. Their military planners had run the calculations 1,000 times. Humanity had 40 combat ships against their 300. Humanity had 1 planet against their 12 star systems. Humanity had been traveling among the stars for 40 years, while the Draxians had been conquering worlds for 2,000. By every measure that mattered, this should have been easy. The humans would realize their mistake quickly. They would sue for peace. They would pay reparations and accept whatever humiliating terms the hegemony demanded. And the galaxy would forget that this brief conflict had ever happened. The Draxians were wrong about almost everything. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the carrier Defiance as his fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the Draxian border. Through the view screen, he could see the enemy armada waiting for them. 120 warships arranged in perfect formation, their weapons systems already powered and ready. His own fleet numbered 38 ships. 2 had been delayed by engine problems and would not arrive in time for the battle. Carter studied the enemy formation carefully. The Draxians favored overwhelming force and direct assault. Their tactics had not changed in centuries because they had never needed to change. They were bigger, stronger, and more numerous than almost any enemy they faced. But Carter had not survived 30 years of military service by fighting fair. "All ships, execute pattern Delta," he ordered. The human fleet scattered. Instead of forming a defensive line, which is what the Draxians expected, the smaller human vessels spread out in all directions. They moved fast and unpredictably, using their size advantage to slip between the larger enemy ships. The Draxians hesitated. This was not how battles were supposed to work. Their commanders tried to reform their lines, tried to bring their superior numbers to bear, but the humans were already among them. The Battle of Vaughn's Reach had begun. Lieutenant Kate Murray flew her fighter through the chaos. Her squadron had been assigned to strike at the enemy command ships, a task that everyone knew was probably suicide, but Kate had volunteered anyway. Her younger brother had served on a colony ship that the Draxians had destroyed 10 years ago during a border dispute. She had been waiting a long time for this moment. Her fighter was fast and maneuverable, designed for exactly this kind of close-quarters combat. She dodged between the massive Draxian warships, avoiding their weapons fire by inches. Behind her, she could hear the voices of her squadron mates as they fought and died. One by one, the voices went silent. By the time Kate reached the enemy flagship, she was alone. Her fighter had taken heavy damage. One of her engines was dead and warning lights covered her control panel, but she could still fly. She could still fight. The Draxian flagship was enormous, nearly a kilometer long. Its bridge was located at the top of the central tower, protected by multiple layers of armor and defensive weapons. A direct assault was impossible. Kate did not plan to survive this. She pushed her damaged fighter to maximum speed and aimed directly at the bridge. The defensive weapons opened fire, tearing chunks from her ship. She felt the impacts shake her body. She tasted blood in her mouth. But she did not turn away. Her fighter struck the bridge at full speed. The explosion was visible from across the battlefield. The Draxian fleet commander died instantly, along with his entire command staff. The enemy formation fell into confusion. Admiral Carter saw his opportunity. He ordered his remaining ships to press the attack, targeting the Draxian vessels that had lost contact with their commanders. Human ships swarmed around the larger enemy craft, hitting them from multiple angles simultaneously. The Draxians tried to retreat. They tried to reform their lines, but the humans gave them no time. When the carrier Liberty was hit by enemy fire, its captain knew the ship was doomed. The reactor was failing and the hull was breaking apart. Most commanders would have ordered an evacuation. Most commanders would have tried to save as many lives as possible. Captain Marcus Day was not most commanders. He ordered his crew to the escape pods. Then he turned his dying ship toward the nearest Draxian dreadnought and pushed the engines to full power. The Liberty struck the dreadnought amidships. Both ships were destroyed in the explosion. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human crews fought with a ferocity that the Draxians had never encountered. When a boarding party captured the frigate Resolve, the human Marines fought them in the corridors. When their ammunition ran out, they fought with knives. When their knives were taken, they fought with their bare hands. Not one human surrendered. Not one. The battle lasted 8 hours. When it was over, the Draxians had lost 63 ships. The humans had lost 22. It was the most devastating defeat in Draxian military history, and it was only the beginning. Over the following months, human forces pushed deep into Draxian territory. They used tactics that no one else in the galaxy would consider. They attacked supply lines instead of fortifications. They turned captured enemy ships against their former owners. They broadcasted propaganda on every frequency, showing the footage of Keth's beating alongside images of human victories. The message was simple. This is what happens when you hurt someone who protected one of us. On the Draxian colony world of Tharn, human Marines discovered a camp where captured Valorian workers were being held as slaves. The Valorians had been forced to work in the mines, processing ore for the Draxian war machine. Many had died from exhaustion and abuse. The human commander who found the camp sent a single message back to Earth. "We found them. They are free now." The liberation of Tharn was broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had dismissed humanity as insignificant watched in amazement as human soldiers carried weak and injured Valorians to safety. They watched as human doctors treated wounds that Valorian physicians had no supplies to heal. They watched as human ships transported the survivors to safe territory. The Corvani, an insectoid species that had been oppressed by their neighbors for generations, sent a message to Earth's diplomatic corps. They wanted to talk. The Selthari, whose homeworld had been exploited by corporate interests for centuries, requested humanitarian aid. Dozens of other species, the weak and the forgotten and the dismissed, began to look at humanity differently. They began to wonder if perhaps the humans might be different from the other powerful species. They began to hope. The war continued for 8 months. The Draxians committed more ships, more soldiers, more resources. But nothing they did could stop the human advance. For every ship humanity lost, they destroyed 3 Draxian vessels. For every world the Draxians tried to hold, the humans found a way to take it. Finally, the hegemony's leaders gathered in their capital to face a truth they could no longer ignore. They had lost. The humans were coming, and nothing could stop them. The only choice now was whether to surrender or to watch their entire civilization burn. They chose surrender. The Draxian hegemony signed its surrender on the steps of the Grand Palace, the ancient seat of their government that had stood for 3,000 years. Ambassador Chris Palmer represented humanity at the ceremony. He stood on the palace steps as the Draxian High Commander approached him, followed by what remained of the hegemony's leadership council. They had ruled the second-largest military power in the sector. Now they walked with their heads bowed, their pride broken. The terms of surrender were simple but absolute. The hegemony would pay full reparations to Keth and his family. This included not only compensation for his injuries, but also funding for the best medical care available in the galaxy. Keth would never have to work again unless he chose to. The hegemony would broadcast a formal apology across all galactic communication channels. Every species in the galaxy would hear the Draxian High Commander admit that his people had acted without honor and that the consequences had been deserved. The military government that had ruled the Draxians for centuries would be dissolved. Democratic elections would be held, monitored by a joint human-Valorian commission. The Draxian people would choose their own leaders for the first time in their history. And finally, the hegemony would free every slave in their territory. Every Valorian, every Corvani, every being of any species who had been taken against their will would be returned to their homes. The practice of slavery within Draxian space would be abolished forever. The High Commander signed the document with trembling hands. Then he looked up at Palmer with hatred burning in his small eyes. "You have destroyed us," he said. "For one worthless Valorian, you have ended everything we built over thousands of years." Palmer looked at him calmly. "Keth was not worthless," he said. "He was brave. He was kind. He stood up for someone who needed help when no one else would. That makes him worth more than your entire empire." The High Commander had no response to that. He turned and walked back into the palace, a broken figure entering a building that no longer belonged to him. The news of the Draxian surrender spread across the galaxy within hours. Species that had hidden from the hegemony for generations emerged from the shadows. Species that had paid tribute for centuries stopped their payments. Species that had never dared to dream of freedom began to believe it might be possible. And all of them looked toward Earth. Ambassador Palmer addressed the Galactic Council 1 month after the surrender. The chamber was fuller than Emma had ever seen it. Delegations from dozens of species that had never attended council sessions before had requested permission to observe. The human section had been expanded 3 times to accommodate all the diplomatic staff now assigned to Earth's growing mission. Palmer stood on the central platform and waited for silence. When it came, he spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. "We did not come to this galaxy seeking conquest. We did not come seeking wealth or power or territory. We came because we are curious. We came because we wanted to see what was out there. We came because we are dreamers, and the stars called to us." He paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. "But we brought something with us when we came. We brought our values. We brought our beliefs about how people should treat each other. And one of those beliefs is simple." He raised his hand, and a holographic image appeared above him. It showed Keth standing in that corridor, facing the 3 Draxians. "You do not abandon those who stand beside you." The image changed to show the symbol that had been painted on the hull of the cruiser that patrolled Nexus Station now, a human hand clasped with a Valorian hand, surrounded by stars. Keth stood beside Emma Price when no one else would. He asked for nothing in return. He expected nothing. He simply did what he believed was right. Palmer lowered his hand. "And so we did the same for him." On the Nexus trade station, Emma Price sat in a small apartment that had once felt cramped but now felt like home. The view screen on the wall showed Palmer's speech being broadcast across the station, but Emma was not watching it. She was watching Keth. He sat in a comfortable chair by the window, looking out at the stars. His injuries had healed as much as they ever would. His left arms hung motionless at his sides, and a cane leaned against his chair. But his eyes were clear, and his voice was steady when he spoke. "I still do not understand," he said quietly. "Your people fought a war. Your people died. Ships were destroyed. Soldiers were killed. All of this happened because of me." Emma moved to sit beside him. She took his right hand, the one that could still grip hers. "Yes," she said. "It did. Why?" Keth turned to look at her, his large, dark eyes filled with confusion. "I am nobody. I am a maintenance worker. I fix broken pipes and clear clogged drains. I am not important." Emma smiled sadly. "You stepped in front of those Draxians for me. You knew what would happen. You knew they would hurt you, maybe kill you. But you did it anyway." "You were my friend," Keth said, as if that explained everything. "What else could I do?" Emma squeezed his hand. "Exactly. What else could we do?" Outside the viewport, a human cruiser drifted past the station. Its hull was scarred from battle, marked with burns and impact craters from the war it had helped win. But it was still flying. It was still protecting this station and everyone in it. On its side, someone had painted the new symbol of the Human-Valorian Alliance. The 2 hands clasped together, the stars surrounding them, and beneath the image, the words that had come to define humanity's place in the galaxy. "Protect one of us, and we will never forget. harm one of us, and neither will we. Keth looked at the cruiser for a long time. Then he turned back to Emma. Your species is strange, he said. You fight wars over things that no one else considers worth fighting for. You die for principles instead of profit. You treat kindness like it is a debt that must be repaid. I know, Emma said. We have always been that way. It makes no logical sense. No, it does not. Keth was silent for a moment. Then slowly he smiled. It was the first time Emma had seen him smile since before the attack. I think I am glad, he said, that your species came to the stars. Emma smiled back at him. Outside the window, the cruiser continued its patrol, a reminder to everyone who saw it that humanity had arrived in the galaxy and that the galaxy would never be the same. Far away on Earth, President Daniel Grant stood at a window in his office and looked up at the night sky. The war was over. The Draxians were defeated. And everywhere he looked, he saw the consequences of the choice he had made. New alliances were forming. New possibilities were opening. Species that had been ignored for centuries were finding their voices. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. His advisor entered the room behind him. More requests for meetings, sir. The Corvani want to discuss a mutual defense treaty. The Selthari are asking for help with their environmental restoration projects. And the Valorian ambassador wants to thank you personally. Grant nodded slowly. Schedule them all. Sir, if I may ask? The advisor hesitated. Do you have any regrets? About the war, I mean. About all the lives it cost. Grant thought about the question for a long time before answering. We showed the galaxy who we are, he said finally. We showed them that kindness is not weakness. We showed them that loyalty has no price. And we showed them that there are things worth dying for beyond conquest and power. He turned away from the window. No, I have no regrets. And across the galaxy, in countless systems and on countless worlds, beings of every shape and size looked toward the stars and wondered what would happen next. The humans had changed everything. And for the first time in a very long time, many of them felt something they had almost forgotten how to feel. They felt hope.